Thank you so much for joining me on our very last, the Profit Playbook, ending 2025 like a badass. If you've been here from the beginning or hopped in on one or watched the replays, thank you so much for joining us every other Wednesday. If you have a topic for next year, this was a topic that was received from one of our viewers. So I'm telling you, if you give me a topic, I will do my very best to get it on and get all of your questions answered. I love the feedback. Good, bad, or ugly. I love the feedback. Let's see if I can get stuff going here. There we go. So just a little bit before we begin, I am Heather Haro, CRO of DiversifyRx. And if you are new to us, never been on a webinar or have been on all of them, you will hopefully know about the Pharmacy Profit Summit. Pharmacy Profit Summit is March 28th through 29th in Dallas. And we want to see all your beautiful smiling faces there. Tickets will go up after the first of the year. So this is the cheapest you can buy your tickets right now. And if you are a member, please make sure that you buy your ticket through the member portal. So basically, so I don't have to do any extra work. I would super duper appreciate it. But the content, Lisa is just an absolute pro at putting content together. And for this year is no different. We're going to be in a larger venue, more exhibitors, more attendees, and much bigger, better, bolder content from the stage. I'm super excited about all of the business skills and ideas, strategies that Lisa is putting together from the stage. Now, if you are not familiar, our membership is Pharmacy Badass University. And if you are not a member, now's the time to become a member. We would love to have you join us. This is an example of our pharmacy profit matrix. We are going to, whether you do self-guided or you choose to go the way of the coach, and Mike is your fabulous coach, this is what you're going to go through. You're going to go through step 1, reversing poor cash flow and low profits. Step 2, you're going to build strong business foundations. Step 3, you're going to scale your profitability in your pharmacy. And typically, I live the webinars that we've done typically live in these 3 steps. Well, these ladies today are specialized, and they live in our 4th step. The ladies at Secure 340B live in our 4th step. That's diversification. And where you will see them is they have their own spot. It's the 340B spot is all them. And the strategies, the help, questions that you have, I think 99.999% of all of that content in there is inspired by them. The strategies come straight from them. They are our absolute go-to every single time, 100% 340B experts. We love these ladies. So with that said, well, I got my slides a little backwards, but that's okay. With that said, we are going to talk to Secure 340B, my good friends, Julie and Amanda from 340B. If you've been to our conference, you've chatted with them every single year and seen them on some podcasts and other fabulous things. But today we're going to dive into specifically 340B rebates and the MFP rebates, and just really the basics, answer the questions, all of that on what we need to know. Now, I know, Julie, you have a slide deck, so this is not up my alley at all. I am so glad to have these ladies here to educate me and all of you. So, Julie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Amanda, tell us a little bit about yourself. And then, ladies, I will let you take it from there.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having us. My name is Julie Crozier, and I'm the CEO of Secure 340B. We help independent pharmacies in the 340B space. And my background is I'm a pharmacist and worked in several different areas of pharmacy. I was a co-founder of Macro Helix, which was sold to McKesson in 2012. and I've worked with Amanda for the past 5 years. Has it been 5 years? Yeah, 5 years at this company to help independent pharmacies.
Very good. Very good. Amanda?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Amanda Gaddy. I'm also a pharmacist. Julie had me come on and join her when she was at Macrohelix, and I was in charge of all contract pharmacies. So I learned the good, the bad, and the ugly. And honestly, when I left, I never wanted to say the word 340B again. And just to be honest, but I saw that there was such a need. All these pharmacies were involved in 340B, and some just didn't know what they were doing. And so that's the reason that I started Secure 340B. We're not a TPA. We help independent pharmacies understand contracting and also just program management. And obviously, right now, what we're doing is very important with analytics and really understanding how all of this is impacting pharmacies.
Very good. Very good. Well, I will stop sharing your beautiful little faces, and then Julie, you and Amanda can take it away.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Let me get my presentation up.
And again, if you're just hopping in, we definitely add all your questions to the chat. I won't be interrupting these ladies as much as I normally do because this is a little bit of a heavier topic, but we will get all of your questions answered.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. The reason that we thought it would be helpful to have this information, you might have seen some of it elsewhere, is that it's
Julie,
constantly.
I think it's your screen is all black.
Oh, it sure is. I did this before. Hold on one second. Good thing you're not asking me about PowerPoint expertise.
That's
Let's see.
okay. That is a-okay.
Can you see
It's
anything right now?
just you.
Just me. Okay.
Zoom doesn't make it very easy sometimes.
Not for me. Somehow. I'm just going to do the whole desktop and see if we can't.
There we go.
Okay.
Now I can see your Zoom.
Yep. There we go.
Okay, very
Okay.
good.
Sorry, guys.
No worries.
All right, so we'll go ahead and quickly get started. So some of this information has been presented elsewhere and at other times, but what everybody knows about 340B and pharmacy in general is that it's changing all the time. And in fact, Beacon, which is the vendor for pharma for the 340B rebates, changed some of the specs as recently as last week. So if you thought you were up to date, then you need to make sure that you're continuing to watch. And if you have no idea what's going on with the 340B rebates, this will be a good starting off point. On the next few slides, I'm going to go into some detail. I'm going to be repeating myself, and you may be saying, well, Julie, you've already said that. And the reason I'm repeating myself is there's a lot of intricacies, and I think it's worth hearing the same thing a couple times to make sure that you get it. But the most important thing in this presentation and in these discussions will be a few slides towards the end that are really the nuts and bolts of what you have to know, what you really need to know, and what you need to share with your hospital or clinic partner within 340B. So, when it gets started, as everybody knows, the top drug, what I call them the top 10 drugs, they're the first 10 drugs, MFP drugs. Everyone on this webinar knows which drugs these are because you've had to register with a Medicare transaction facilitator. And so, but I wanted to put them up here. The complicated piece about the 340B rebate and the MFP rebate starting at the same time, they both start January 1st, is that there's the potential for both rebates to be applicable to the same claim. And just like Medicaid, if you guys remember with Medicaid and 340B, Medicaid cannot receive a rebate from pharma at the same time that a 340B price is offered. Well, the same thing happens here on a claim. A Medicare claim for a top 10 drugs, one of the drugs that I just showed you, if that's 340B eligible and it's a Medicare payer, they're subject both to that claim is subject to both rebates. And you can't have two rebates on the same claim. And so this is where it gets very tricky in that what Beacon has said, and we'll go through this in a second, is the 340B rebate will always dominate. In other words, your hospital or clinic partner will get their 340B rebate instead of you getting your MFP rebate. Now, this isn't the end of the world like it sounds. It would require some later reconciliation or carving these out, but we're going to go through those scenarios. As an overview, January 1st, Well, let's start with today. On the far left, all drugs today have 340B pricing. If you're covered entity, if you've ever seen in their 340B catalog, there's a 340B price for virtually every drug. But in January, for all top 10 drugs, for all of those drugs I mentioned, every NDC that's affiliated with those drugs, there will be no 340B price in the catalog. In other words, a WAC price will be loaded in the Cardinal or Amerisource or McKesson or whatever wholesaler will be loaded in there and not the 340B price. And then on the far right, for the top 10 drugs, Medicare patients only, Medicare claims, as I said before, those claims are subject to both a 340B rebate and an MFP rebate. And so the decision needs to be made is who gets the rebate and how do you want to have that set up. Just to beat a dead horse, wanted to say one more time, 340B today, you know the 340B price is available. The covered entity, your hospital or clinic partner, is currently buying drugs on 340B. When there's an accumulation, you order it or they order it and it's sent to you and they pay 340B for that cost, for that drug. The other thing is if you have a winners only logic in your 340B dispensing fee, that works perfectly well now if it's based on the 340B cost because the 340B cost is loaded in the wholesaler catalog and therefore can be used. And of course, there's no MFP rebate interaction with 340B because there's no MFP rebate at all right now today, and there's no MFP rebate, no 340B rebate today either. This all starts January 1st. So just to recap, January 1st, the 340B price will not be in the catalog. The CE can no longer buy directly on 340B. Every NDC that they purchase of a top 10 drug, regardless of who it's for, whether it's for your pharmacy, whether it's for a patient in the ER, whether it's for one of their clinics, regardless, they're going to have to buy it on WAC first. There's no getting around that anymore. And then they'll have to wait for a 340B rebate. For Med D claims, again, there's the overlap between Med D rebate and 340B rebate. And if you have an uninsured program and that dispensing fee for your patient is based on the 340B cost, that will no longer work because the 340B cost is not in the catalog. The only exception to that would be is if your third-party administrator has the ability to still calculate it based on a 340B price that they can obtain through Beacon. But outside of that, the top 10 drugs will be very difficult to put on the uninsured program without some coordination. I won't go through all of these because it sort of repeats the same thing. But again, I told you it's a lot to take in, and I really think it's important to kind of double down on it. We all know the launch date for both rebates. We know that the drugs that are affected. We know the 340B rebate is for all payers, not just Medicare, all payers. On the MFP rebate, you know, it's just Medicare. For procuring the drugs, as I said, for the 340B rebate, covered entities pay WAC. For the MFP rebate, you still purchase your medications the way you do now. And then if we go down to data submission, oops, hold on one second. If we go down to data submission, what happens for the rebate, 340B rebate, and you may be asking yourself, well, why do I care? Well, the reason that you'll probably want to care is if your covered entity does not submit the data that's required to Beacon, then they won't get that 340B rebate, which means there'll be no 340B savings for you and the covered entity. Basically, it will mean that those drugs no longer qualify for 340B, and nobody wants that to happen. So that's why that's important. For you guys, for the MFP rebate, you just adjudicate as usual. And then
Julie, I have a quick question. Is
Sure.
one rebate easier to get than the other?
Not necessarily. Well, the MFP rebate doesn't require extra claim submissions. So that's just adjudicating the claim, it going through as normal, you receiving your PBM payment, and then later receiving the the MFP payment. So no work is required. However, the larger savings in most cases is on that 340B rebate because that'll be the difference between WAC and 340B. And that requires the covered entity, a consultant, or the TPA, depending on the TPA's availability, to submit claims, every single claim in the format required in order to get that rebate. So I don't know if that answered it, but the MFP is quicker. The 340B rebate is possibly greater savings, greater dollars to share.
Okay. She said yes. Thank you.
Okay, good. The rebate flow, you know about the MFP rebate, but the 340B rebate, as we said, they're going to purchase it on WAC. The CE or TPA or consultant's going to submit those claims to Beacon, a company called Beacon, and then the manufacturer will review and issue payment. If you look over to the far right, though, when it's MFP and 340B, as I said, the 340B rebate is always going to be sent to the covered entity. If there's two rebates at play, the covered entity will still receive their rebate, no matter what, unless they are carved out. So what that means is if you submit a claim for a Medicare patient for a top 10 drug and you receive the MFP rebate, let's say you receive $200, later that claim is determined to be 340B eligible. What happens is that the CE will receive their rebate, which is the difference between WAC and 340B. And your rebate, in most cases, will be taken from the next claim. In other words, it will be deducted for the next claim. So they won't go into your bank account and say, "No, I want that $200 back." What they'll do is if your next rebate on that NDC is $300, they will only send you 100 because they've deducted the 200 that they quote overpaid you. So that's why it gets confusing, and that's why a lot of people, the knee-jerk reaction is to carve out drugs from 340B if they're top 10, and 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 so some finagling has to be done in order to allow that to happen. The rebate calculation is pretty straightforward. I just went through who receives the rebate. If it's not 340B, you don't have to worry about it. You always receive your MFP rebate if it's not a 340B claim. Nothing changes there. Likewise, if it's not a top 10 drug Medicare patient, if it's not a Medicare patient, you don't have to worry about the overlap between the 340B and MFP rebate because if it's not Medicare, then there's no MFP rebate at play. The timing for the 340B rebate, it's supposed to be within 10 days of validation. The MFP, as you probably heard, is 14 days after, oh gosh, did that again, after the manufacturer receives the claim from the data module. The risk financial impact is on the far left, is the CE is going to carry the cash flow burden because they can no longer buy at 340B for those top 10 drugs, regardless of payer. And they need to make sure that that rebate's received. For you guys, you carry the cash flow burden for the MFP rebate because again, you're not getting the full reimbursement. You're only getting that MFP, and you have to wait for that rebate. And just like the CEs, you need to make sure that your MFP rebate is received.
We have a question, Julie. Why would my CE say they are not signing up for Beacon? I'm a contract pharmacy.
So CEs are required to sign up with Beacon if they want any of these drugs to be 340B eligible. And let me just reemphasize and make sure your CEs are aware of this, not just for the contract pharmacies, which affects all of us, right? For every dispensation in their hospital, regardless of where, they cannot buy it on 340B without submitting to Beacon. They can't buy it on 340B anyway, but they won't get that money back. So if they want any of these top 10 drugs for any payers whatsoever, so any dispensations of these top 10 drugs to be eligible for 340B, they not only have to register with Beacon, they have to submit claims to Beacon before they'll receive the rebate. So the reason they probably don't want to sign up with Beacon is they're not aware of what the repercussions are, would be my guess.
Okay.
Anything else on that?
No, Amanda is handling it. It says, is the debt for RX refund on the future NDC applied to a 340B claim, or can it be non-340B claim? Amanda answered, the debt RX fund would be applied to the non-340B claim.
Yep.
Oh, thank
Okay.
you.
Really, really quickly, this is how the process works today. If you're in 340B, you know this. The patient fills a prescription at your pharmacy. Usually the third-party administrator, and there's a million of them out there, but third-party administrator does the testing. Is the patient a patient of the entity? Were they seen for a reason that is in the diagnosis? Is the medicine related, et cetera? There's a lot of criteria. If they carve out Medicaid, is it a non-Medicaid patient, et cetera? And then does it pass those filters? And some of those filters are, is it a restricted drug from manufacturers? All of that stuff that happens today, um, and if it doesn't pass any of those filters, then the claim doesn't qualify. You guys know that. If it does pass those filters, then an accumulation is added to your accumulator within the portal. And it says, yep, now you can buy a package of Eliquis. And so either you order it or the CE orders it, and it shows up at your pharmacy, and the CE has paid the 340B price for it. And so you both share in the savings between what you got paid from the PBM and what they paid for the drug. So you share in that revenue with a dispensing fee model in most cases. The important part is this bottom left where it says the drug replenishment is purchased on 340B. That's today. For January 1st, as I said, top 10 drugs, patient still fills the prescription. The TPA determines is it eligible. If it's eligible for 340B, then it gets sent to this Beacon platform, which is Pharma's platform. Beacon then checks, is it Medicare Part D? Whether it's Medicare Part D or not, if you go straight down from that right here, it goes straight down, regardless if it's Med D or not, they're going to remit a rebate to the CE, a 340B rebate. And it's going to be calculated as the difference between WAC and the 340B cost. If it's Medicare D, this rebate is then, the MFP rebate is then denied to the pharmacy. Remember, I said that the CE always gets their rebate. And when I say denied, I don't mean they'll never get it. I mean that they may get it, and then, like we said earlier, it get credited on the next claim. And the reason I have in here, if 340B price is less than MFP, that's a little bit more complicated, but basically you will not receive your rebate from MFP. And if you do, it'll be very minimal. It'll be a little bit, but for the most part, more than likely, you won't receive that. So what does that mean to you? Well, that means that you either need to carve these out of 340B, or you need to get with your covered entity and decide, what are we going to do? How are we going to share? And how are we going to share their rebate and what you received from the PBM initially? So here's the part that if you're already brain dead and feel like you've got too much information in your head, this is the important parts, at least in our mind. CEs must register with Beacon. No ifs, ands, or buts, unless they don't care about 340B. Pharmacies must register with the MTF. I'm sure most of, if not all of you, have already done that. Pharmacies should also register with Beacon. It is not required, and it is not the same portal that CEs register in. But Beacon will also be tracking the MFP rebates. So in order to have even more visibility into where your MFP rebate lies, they are suggesting you log in there too. We suggest it as well. The part that needs to go to your CEs, if they're not already aware, and many are not, is that for those top 10 drugs for any payer, not only do they have to be registered with Beacon, but those claims have to be submitted to Beacon before a rebate will be sent, before a 340B rebate will be sent. Okay? And I put down here just a little bit because I've been hearing things. CEs are like, well, I just don't have the IT resources, or I'm hoping my TPA will do it. Well, we're hoping your TPA will do it too, but they can't do it if they don't have the data. They should have the pharmacy claims data. That shouldn't be a problem. So for you guys, hopefully that's taken care of, but they can't submit the claims data if the CE is not registered with Beacon. They have 45 days to submit these claims in order to receive the rebate. After that, If nothing's been submitted, let's say your CE starts submitting claims February 20th, then all of those drugs prior to that, if they have not been submitted, receive no 340B rebate, and they will continue to have to pay WAC for that without any reimbursement. For those of you who know about manufacturer restrictions, as you know, most manufacturers have placed restrictions on a lot of their drugs. If your covered entity now has to submit data to ESP, or in some cases the pharmacy submit it to ESP in order to lift those restrictions, that still has to happen. For non-top 10 drugs, those ESP submissions still have to happen. Now, if you don't know anything about it, don't worry about it. But if your CE is already submitting claims to ESP to lift restrictions, they're going to have to continue to do that for all non-top 10 drugs, just like they do today. And for the top 10 drugs, it goes to Beacon. Clear as mud? Okay, I think the last slide for me. To reiterate, the decision points that you and your CE need to talk about: should the top 10 drugs remain 340B eligible? In other words, is the TPA automatically going to carve them out as not eligible? Or are there discussions that need to be had to say, yeah, in some instances, and perhaps all, but at least in some instances, should these drugs remain 340B eligible? The lowest hanging fruit is for Medicare patients. Due to the MFP rebate, the easiest thing to do would be to carve those out for Medicare patients. Maybe not it's still going to cost a lot of dollars, but in terms of the least complex, it's carving out those top 10 Medicare patient claims. What you don't want to do, if at all possible, is carve out all top 10 drugs for all payers. You shouldn't have to do that. But you need to talk to your CE and your TPA to discuss what the options are. And if you need our assistance with that, we can certainly do that. But carving everything out is never the first option, in my opinion. You also need to decide on the winners only logic for top 10, because there's no 340B price in the catalog. And then, like I said, for all other payers, at the very least, I believe you should keep 340B eligibility for top 10 drugs for all other payers other than Medicare. Ideally, all payers, but at least all other payers other than Medicare. Finally, you want to see what your TPA's capabilities are, because not all of them can do everything that's going to be needed, and you may need to do it externally, which I know is great news for you guys because you don't have near enough on your plate. Can the TPA carve out by NDC and payer? Will they reconcile anything? Will they provide any impact analyses on what it's going to cost if you carve out these drugs, if you carve out these payers, et cetera, et cetera? And then are the TPAs offering any trainings? And I know some of them are, but if your TPA has not reached out to provide any trainings, you need to ask and see if they're doing that. This is my last slide, I promise. For Beacon submissions, if your TPA needs some elements to submit to Beacon, and like I said, in most cases for retail, I think retail pharmacy, for you guys, I think it'll be fine. I think they can gather most of that stuff. But if they need to gather stuff for medical claims, who's going to collect that for them? Because they can't make it up themselves. Who's going to submit data to Beacon if they don't already have it? If the TPA doesn't already have it, or if the TPA can't do it? How will the uninsured program work? We already mentioned that. Who's reconciling your MFP rebate? I know you might have some PSAOs do it, but perhaps other organizations do that. But who's going to do that? And then the 340B rebate needs to be reconciled too. I wouldn't trust pharma to say that they're always going to send the rebate back when they're supposed to. And then what are the financial implications of carving some or all of those top 10 drugs from 340B? So we're going to turn it over to Amanda, who's going to have a couple slides just here on WAC decreases and the 340B impact.
Thanks, Julie. Before I talk about the WAC decreases, because this is, it has an impact with 340B, but I just wanted to, I made a couple of notes when you were talking. Number one, and this question I get a lot is about like the financial implications for the pharmacy. So if you think about like a dispensing fee, if you get a percent of total paid amount today, starting in 2026 for these 10 drugs, you'll get that same percent unless you work something out with your covered entity and the TPA, but it's going to be of MFP. So if it was, let's say you were paid $500 in December for a claim and MFP is 150, now your percent, your 20% is going to be of that 150 instead of that 500. So you're definitely going to see a difference from a financial impact. And that is if these claims are not carved out. When you're thinking about the financial impact, if you are including them, what you have to think about is what is your dispensing fee? Because your dispensing fee is your margin for 340B. And you compare that to what you would have made on that claim if it would have been carved out, meaning for these MFP drugs, you get the MFP payment from the PBM, you get the remaining rebate from the manufacturer, and then you subtract your cost of goods. Whatever that number is, you compare it to what your dispensing fee is under this model of a percent of MFP, and that tells you the impact. And I just I get that question a lot, so I wanted to make sure that that was clear as mud. I also wanted to reiterate about uninsured claims. So if you have a program that takes care of patients who don't have insurance, they show up at the pharmacy and they have that specific bin PCN group where they can get their medication typically at a 340B acquisition cost plus a nominal dispense fee to you, like $12, $15. Unless something happens, they're going to get to your pharmacy in January and not be able to get their prescription. Because, like Julie mentioned, the prices are not going to be 340B prices that are loaded in that catalog. So when the TPA goes to calculate the dispensing fee or whatever that patient's supposed to pay, that uninsured patient, it's going to pull WAC plus your dispensing fee. So I have heard some TPAs have made arrangements so that 340B pricing will be made available in Beacon. So some TPAs allow the covered entity to go in and enter those amounts, the 340B ceiling price, so that they can still calculate those copays for those uninsured. So this is where communication is so important with your CE and your TPA, because I mean, honestly, if it's an uninsured claim, you got to have a plan. If it's insured, worst case scenario, it gets carved out and you get your refund or the rebate from the manufacturer. But the uninsured patients, there's got to be a plan. So big takeaway. I mean, that's like the biggest takeaway for me is we don't want patients showing up in January and not being able to get their medication. Also, some of the TPAs are talking about zeroing out accumulations, and that would be for the MFP drugs as well as WAC, which I'll talk about in just a second. Real important to understand if those are linked, if there's accumulations that are linked to uninsured claims where the pharmacy has dispensed the medication, the patient has left the building with it, you need to be sure about how they're going to true those up. We don't want them just, thinking that's like an insured, so you're going to get your revenue back, or just zeroing it out, right? Because if they zero it out, then you're just out the difference. So those are some really important takeaways that I want to make sure that you're clear about. With the WAC decreases, so this is, there are certain medications, and it's on the next slide, that have, if you want to just real quickly go to the next slide, Julie. So here are the prescriptions that we know have a significant WAC decrease. So this is not 340B related, this is just in general. Okay, so go back to the previous one. The reason I bring this up is because what does that mean? That means that a product that's worth $500 in December may be worth $150 in January. So what we don't want to do is we don't want you having, and this is regardless of 340B, you do not want any excess inventory of any of these products in your pharmacy. So you want to make sure that you're checking, your inventory. It may be even too late to send overstock back by now, but check-in will call. And also, and this is what's been missed, is your accumulator. So if you have items that are due to you that you've been invoiced for, those need to be reconciled before 2026. Because what we don't want to happen is you're paying for a product that's worth $500. You get it, and either you can't use it this year, so you're using it next year where it's worth a fraction of the cost. And And then that's an immediate loss. And we also don't want any kind of retro qualifications. We see this a lot where, Cs will come in and they'll say, oh, well, these claims should have qualified or their referrals. We don't want any new accumulations if you cannot use the product for the end of the year for these products because it will result in a loss to you. Also, I would, educate the staff, only fill these medications when they're requested and let it hit your 340B account. Typically we pull what's on our shelf, give it to the patient and get that replenishment on the 340B account. For these specific products, I would run it through, let it hit the 340B order so it never hits your retail account so you don't have overstock that you need to return. And then I give an example here. You dispense an item with a whack of 600 in December. It's replenished in January with a whack of 300. That's a $300 loss to your pharmacy immediately. And again, that is if you're purchasing on your retail account and getting it replenished on the 340B account. If you're able to get it where it's only hitting the 340B account and it's not a true replenishment for what you've purchased it, that's okay. It's really that whole, you're buying it for something and it's worth a lot less later. That's the key. So again, the wrap up for this is, discuss clearing out those accumulations with your covered entity so that we really have kind of a clean start for these products beginning in January.
I think that's everything. We're certainly open for questions if there's still some outstanding ones.
Yeah, there was one. You may have already answered it, but I'll just reiterate it again. Will MFP and 340B rebates data submitted on the same platform? So are we submitting them on the same platform?
Well, MFP rebate, you won't submit data. I mean, you just adjudicate. But the 340B rebates will be submitted on Beacon.
Okay. The PowerPoint, this whole the video will be sent out tomorrow. I'll be sure to put links. Amanda is so kind to put in the links for where to sign up for Beacon and MTF. I'll put those in that replay as well. So you'll have it all in there. Let's see. Do you recommend we try to negotiate a higher percentage per claim now with the CE? What percentage in relation to the current percentage negotiated? Say you get 15% per claim now, what should that increase be?
It's a difficult question because here's what we don't know. We don't know what the 340B prices are going to be, and we do not know what the WAC prices are going to be. So there is some crossover with some of those products having a decrease in WAC that are also part of the MFP drugs. What happens is whenever the WAC comes down, the 340B price goes up. And so it's hard to say like where that sweet spot's going to be as far as asking for an increase, because those are two numbers that we just don't have right now.
Okay.
It certainly, Julie, would you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I'm hesitant to recommend a dispense fee renegotiation at this point just because there's going to be less revenue anyway. And so what we don't want is for your CE to say, oh, there's less revenue in January. That's because I gave a higher dispensing fee, which, it's we really want to start that as soon as we can do the analyses that Amanda's talking about in January when we have real numbers. And also so that the CEs can see, listen, there's fewer dollars to go around for the Medicare claims than there used to be, at least for those top 10 drugs. And so they just need to level set that there's going to be a revenue decrease. But then negotiate, okay, we still have these dollars. What can we negotiate to where the pharmacy is still making, making their profit and the CE is still making the lion's share of the revenue?
It's an issue for everybody. I mean, like nobody's making it out here, right? And so more than ever, this is the time to get around and really work as a true partner with the covered entity and the pharmacy to say, here's the numbers, like here it is. Like, how do we work together to make this work for everybody? And ultimately to help, pharmacies stay open, hospitals stay open, and access the medications for patients.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I intended to, if they don't have anybody to help them gather this data or help make decisions, and they're just sticking their head in the sand because it's just too much and they have other things to do, and I totally get that. we can assist. We've started to help some hospitals and clinics because of if they can't make it, then our pharmacies don't make it. And so, if they can't get the resources they need, reach out to us because it is not simple. And just like you guys, everybody's got their regular daytime job, and you want to pile this on top of it and try to understand a whole new way of this program working. It's just overwhelming.
Right. One more question. My FQHC said they will not provide any rebates for MFP drugs and won't carve them out since it wasn't in the original contract. How should we handle this? Would RX Pendulum help?
I don't know who RX Pendulum is. Do you, Amanda?
I do not, but so wait, hold on. Would you read that question once again?
Yep. My FQHC said they will not provide any rebates. Rebates for MFP drugs and won't carve them out since it wasn't in the original contract. How would you handle this?
Okay, so what they're saying is they are going to keep them in 340B, which means they will get the 340B rebate, but the pharmacy won't get their MFP rebate. What they don't understand, though, is that the pharmacy is only getting a small amount up front, the MFP. And even if you pass that over to them and they replenish the drug, there still has to be a reconciliation. So that would they're going to have to figure out that's not going to work for the pharmacy or the CE unless they get together and try to determine how to reconcile this outside of their TPA. And I don't know who that company is.
I completely said it wrong. I am blind without my glasses. It's RX Paradigm. They have their own pharmacies and understand this. Their intent on keeping the money is his further comment back to you. Sorry, Chris, that I mispronounced that.
Yeah, maybe they could reach out to us directly. I think I know what they're trying to say or what they're saying, what you're saying. But we need to dive into the details of how that would work. I mean, it does work, but you need to redo your dispensing fees because again, the amounts are not the same as they were before, the paid amount.
And then there was another question.
Okay. Oh,
From Teresa.
yep. I don't see it anymore in mine. Will you
Yeah,
read it
I'll
off?
read it. It says, I have 7 Xarelto bottles due from me from my 340B account. I can't use them by the end of the year. If I understand it, should I not let those Xarelto bottles come in so I deny those claims now?
Yes. So if you've already been invoiced for those claims, so with 340B, some programs are invoiced when a claim qualifies and some only after you've received the replenishment. So if you've already been invoiced, you would want to make sure that you were credited for all of those claims on a future invoice. If you have not been invoiced, I would recommend that you just work with the covered entity and the TPA to remove those accumulations from the accumulator so that you're not, if let's say that you order it in January, you would not want to pull a claim from this year where you're passing revenue for a higher WAC item and getting something that's worth a lot less.
And if anybody has, either we didn't answer clearly enough or there was just too many circumstances to really articulate what we think, just shoot us an email and we can gather more information if we needed.
Yeah, and we will be happy to put all of these wonderful ladies' contact information into the replay tomorrow, so you can go straight to them. Thank you, ladies, so much. I don't see anything else. Mike, have I missed anybody? Oh, do I register?
Coming in slow, but they're coming in.
Oh, sorry, guys. Okay, what is your opinion? Vicky, I missed your question above. I couldn't go back and find it, but I have it now. What is your opinion about the timing of refunds? Do you think it will be typical for the claim to be determined 340B eligible before the pharmacy received the manufacturer refund?
That's a tough one. I can't, I don't think so. It just seems because when you're adjudicating the claim, it's going to the Medicare facilitator, and then the TPA will get the claim usually that night or the next day, and then some of them have a holding period for a couple days, and then they send it to Beacon. I mean, it's really hard to say which will come first, but I mean, either way, no matter which way it comes first, there'll be an adjustment if the MFP comes first and later it's 340B. Like I said, the 340B rebate will always occur, and the MFP rebate will be deducted. But it'll be interesting to see. I would think the MFP rebate would come first, but um, I don't know. It depends on how quickly Beacon can get their stuff to Pharma and how quickly Pharma can get back an answer.
And then one last question from the same person that asked about the Xarelto. Do I register with Beacon and CMS?
Well, so you definitely have to register with CMS, and there's somewhere in the chat where I put in both links. Beacon is optional, but we would recommend it because that's where you're able to track like the claims, the 340B rebate claims. And so we would recommend doing both. I mean, obviously you have to for the CMS one.
Okay.
Putting that link in again.
Thank you, Mike. And we'll put it in the replay as well. We'll put both of those in the replay as well. Thank you, ladies, so much for coming and sharing your incredible knowledge about this subject. Like they said, if you have any other questions, need clear answers, or you have a very particular situation, feel free to reach out to them. They are incredibly easy to get a hold of and very responsive. They are fabulous. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time. Remember, everybody, go get your summit tickets. And I will see you in the new year. So our new set of webinars will begin in January. And again, email me with all of your thoughts about the webinars this far. If there's a product, a service, hot topic that you would need questions on, want questions on, would like me to cover, please let me know. I love trying to give you all a voice to our phenomenal partners that we get to share, this industry with. So thank you all very much. Everybody have a fantastic Christmas and New Year's, and I will see you next year. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.